everybody. Welcome to the show. I have a very special guest today that we're talking to. I am joined by Sarah Crim, who is the executive director of an organization called JAB Cares, which is the philanthropic arm of the Josh Abbott Band, who you will learn more about momentarily. And Sarah is a 2006 graduate of Texas Tech University. Reckham, Sarah, and she got her master's in communication studies in 2012. Sarah, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Coach? Good
Awesome.
to see you.
Yeah, this is a long time coming. We've been trying to reschedule, and make our calendars work. Thanks for carving out time today.
Sure, yeah, and it's a great day. I'm here in Dallas. It's like a rare, somewhat still cool day. So I think all the rescheduling has been worth it.
Excellent. You got a great view behind you. Tell us exactly where you are. It's kind of a neat concept.
I am at Watermark Church in Dallas, and this is their community center. So they open it up to the public. They've got a coffee shop and this huge kind of office setup in the downstairs area. So they do some good conversion of bringing people in and trying out the church that way, and make it, just feel like it's user friendly, so people don't feel so intimidated maybe trying out the church on Sunday.
You had me at coffee.
Exactly.
Awesome. So just kind of frame the conversation, everybody. The reason I wanted to bring Sarah on the program was, besides the fact she's possibly the most hilarious person I've ever met, is also just the work that she's doing is, it's unique, because the Josh Abbott Band is a independent Texas country band. Mm-hmm. And they've got a absolutely rabid fan base and following that's really nationwide and international. And typically you see bands, organizations, companies create a private foundation, and they just sort of throw money at a couple causes that maybe they're fond of. And I think everyone sort of has their favorite charities they like to donate to. Like for me, mine are cancer research and literacy for kids. But the Josh Abbott Band does something a little different than most bands. And what it is they've created a nonprofit really to help their fan base, and also enable and empower their fan base to kind of pick and choose what charities are meaningful for them to want to get on board and all help together, which I think is important. And if you've listened to my message for any length of time, I'm a big believer in, don't just paint the picture. Let your audience, whether you're a band, a company, a solopreneur, let your audience in and help paint the picture themselves. And I think that's a great example of what you guys are doing, Sarah. Could you talk to us just a little bit kind of about the genesis of JAB Cares and how that's become a wonderful extension of the band and the brand?
Sure. So we actually, probably about 4 years ago, we had just gotten on a label with Warner, and we were pushing a new EP, 5 songs, really fun, really not necessarily just geared towards college, but a couple songs that were reminiscent of that. And so the management team, this is actually before I worked for Josh, but the management team thought it would be really fun to engage students. And of course, we've got a natural relationship with Texas Tech. So we reached out to the Rawls College of Business and asked them, hey, let's work on something with you guys. Let's, see what we can come up with. And so they basically gave us a senior capstone marketing class that one of their senior projects was creating some type of a campaign that would create organic growth for this EP. And of course, they had a lot of social media content and stuff with Greek organizations. But this one group of 4 college kids came up with JAB Cares, which was basically the base model of what we do. And that was the band plugging in with different causes. So their original idea was it would be us plugging in with the Greek and Panhellenic organizations and then utilizing their philanthropic causes that they give away to. So They kicked it around, gave the idea. Josh loved it. And he kept saying, I really want to do this. Like, I want this to be a thing. And a lot of other people in the music have their own, of course, their own charities, their own organizations. Sure. And so I worked with the management team for about almost 2 years. And then Josh just said, you know, hey, it's time for us to do this. And so he politely kind of motioned me over and told me, like, you're going to do this now, and this is going to be your baby. So we started that process just roughly 2 years ago, went through all of the paperwork and the minutia that goes into getting filed with a 501c3. We went through an awesome compliance company that walked us through everything.
Yeah.
And everything since that has been really organic. So we set it up because we wanted it to be about our fan base and their needs. What you were saying, you know, there's a lot of people that serve specific causes. But we wanted, if there was, you know, if we're only serving public, you know, doing public servants or education or cancer, and we have a fan who has a disability, a physical disability, they need a wheelchair ramp built. We don't want to be limited and not able to give that money to them. So we set it up to where we can kind of give money to whoever we want to. And I think that has served, in terms of our kind of our heartbeat and our base, that's really served us the best.
Absolutely. And it's kind of funny you mentioned the word heartbeat, because when I look at your logo, what do we see? For those people who aren't aware of it, tell us about the logo.
The logo is, I'm trying to remember, is it the guitar with heart compressed in it? I haven't looked at it in a minute. Yeah. So, and we wanted something that was we kicked around like just Jab Cares, but we're like, it needs to be not too literal, but if someone jumps onto the Jab Cares site that doesn't listen to the Josh Abbott Band, sure, we want them to know we're affiliated with music. So we went with something pretty literal that speaks to who we are and kind of what we're trying to do.
And I'll post an image of the logo with your permission.
Sure, yeah.
It's a guitar underneath the words Jab Cares, and it has a heart in the center of it.
Right in the middle of it, yeah.
So when you mentioned the term heart-centered approach, like that's immediately what I thought of, like that's the perfect logo.
Yeah.
Wow. So I want to backtrack for a minute and just kind of connect the dots for everybody on how you got involved originally with Josh Abbott Band, but then also you had alluded to sort of how your role expanded with Jab Cares. Can you backtrack for us just sort of how you made the connection with Josh and the band originally?
Yeah, Josh and I went to Texas Tech at the same time, and he was my waiter at Stella's, which is for college kids, it's a pretty upscale Italian food restaurant. So me and some of my college roommates, our youngest roommate turned 21, so we thought we'd go get a really highfalutin cocktail. I think it was like a cranberry vodka.
That's highfalutin for college, you know?
Yeah.
It ain't Lone Star beer.
Yeah, or well, whatever, you know. Yeah. So we went to Stella's and had dinner, and Josh was our waiter, and he just was, of course, like super charming, engaging. We all had a great time that night. And then him and I got to be friends in undergrad, and then he actually took a year off after school to work for a political campaign and just decided it was not his bread and butter. So he decided to go back to grad school, and that was exactly when I graduated, and we ended up in the same program together. So we taught together for about 2 years. We were TAs. We did a lot of speeches, and since we were communications majors, we all talked about our beliefs, feelings, and thoughts a lot. So you get to know each other pretty well. So that's exactly when he started playing at Blue Light too. So that's cool. Right when his career got kicked off, and we just kept in touch since then. And he called me one day and said, "You're going to come work for me." And I thought he was joking, but I've been with him for 3.5 years. So
what was your first role there?
I was the day-to-day manager. So I worked directly on the management team, which you handle, just like it says, you handle the day-to-day, all the little details that come from the calendar, booking, merch, all that kind of the finance stuff that keeps them, keeps them going on just a smaller, more minuscule level.
Sure. What I find really interesting about sort of where you started in your role with the band and your transition to where you are now is in your role, the day-to-day operations, the merch, all your different touch points with the band that really allowed you right away to get a real finger on the pulse of your customer,
Mm-hmm.
your audience, like what the typical Josh Abbott Band audience member looks like, walks like, talks like, where they like to hang out, what else they listen to, you know, just sort of the like demographics, psychographics, if you will. And I think that probably prepared you very well for what you're doing right now. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah.
How those two intersections have really helped one another?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a target demo. I'm a tech grad. I'm 3 years to the day younger than Josh. So we do have the same birth date, but I'm 3 years younger than him. So 3 years younger. A lot of the vernacular he uses, the things he writes about are biographical for me. So,
Sure.
And he writes, you know, he's a man, so he writes a lot of songs for and about women. So I'm a target demo. So, and I always loved his music and I listened to it. And then when I began working for the band, I was ingesting our social interactions every day. So I had to keep up with Josh's Twitter, look on, you know, how that was trending, keep up with our Facebook, keep up with our Instagram. And so in a way I did get to know the personality, but outside of mine as the demographic and got to know our fan base a little bit better.
Sure.
And I think people are very, you know, they're very open and honest on social media, maybe sometimes to a fault, but you really do kind of see common themes, common interest, and the different things that we've done that kind of tugged on their hearts that have resonated. You know, we did the She Will Be Free video. That was before I worked for the guys, but we did a music video, and Josh had just started learning a little bit about human trafficking and was really, really impacted by it, and thought this is a good medium to open that conversation. And it really, really resonated with a lot of people, because not that it was everyone's first introduction into, I guess, the whole concept of human trafficking, but
For some it was, I'm sure.
well, I think we put statistics and put specific information on there that was connected to the United States and within things going in our backyard. And I think people had watched Taken or movies like Traffic and thought like, oh, it's happening outside to Americans outside of the country. And so for us to read the statistics and then to, you know, kind of parlay that onto our fan base. And it really did, they reacted the same way we did. Yeah. So I think a lot of it in terms of messaging and in terms of what affects or impacts are things that we feel are important. And then they also resonate with our fan base. It's the same way that our music transitions to them, you know?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's interesting. You look at corporate citizenship with different organizations and how they get involved in their own backyard. I'm a big fan of small business. I'm a solopreneur. I'm an author, speaker. So I like the mom and pop shops. It's where I like to hang out. But one organization that's a big kind of, quote, corporate entity that I think does a really nice job with it is Starbucks. Mm-hmm. You know, they're global, but they act locally, and their individual stores are empowered to get involved with causes in the community, sponsor events, actually go out and give their employees release time to go out and get their hands dirty and pick up trash on the road, adopt a highway, whatever it is. And I think when you're able to do that and you're able to get involved in your community, that it deepens the relationship with your customers. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I know that my local Starbucks has actually sponsored fundraising events that I've conducted. So that's kind of why I share that example. But I'd love to hear from you how Jab Cares and creating this charitable arm of the brand has deepened your relationship with existing fans, and just maybe a success story or two. Mm-hmm. Tug at my heartstrings, and everyone who's listening, please.
I think for me, I think the thing that I've most been proud of is we have people that have become fans of the Josh Abbott Band, maybe that don't listen to country music, but now they respect and they support the band just because of we've helped their organization. Sure. We worked with this amazing man. Ben Rogers is he's a local sports DJ, or is it sports broadcaster?
A talk show host?
There it is, yeah. So he had an organization, he worked with an organization in his community called Win the Day. And this really awesome man, Bruce, started Win the Day for kids in his area, just building confidence through athletics. And he actually was diagnosed with cancer. So we came in and helped do this benefit for Bruce and helped them use, we allowed them to use our 501c3 and gave the donations back 100%. But we saw a lot of support come in through that community just for us giving that small show of support to Bruce and his cause. And created this awesome relationship with this community. They're out in Salina, which is just north of Dallas, but that's just a side effect. Like we're not doing it to build that fan base, but it is a really awesome side effect that comes along with just trying to help people. And then I think Harvey is probably by far the most, that's the most I've been impressed with, just Josh and his desire to go help people. He before we even got organized, I think it was on Saturday before Harvey hit, he texted and was like, what are we going to do? How are we going to help people? Can I go down? What can I do? And my mom's boyfriend actually works with the National Guard. So he was actually down outside of Rockport and was like, we're not going to know until it hits. And then we won't know where the eye hits. And, there's all these factors. And so I told Josh, hey, these men that are working the disaster relief, they've been eating, is it MRE?
MREs, yeah.
Yeah. They've been eating MREs they were already on their 4th or 5th day. And that's all they have for the whole time they're down there. Are these, and they're not that there's good MREs. These were like old. So, Josh and his guys at Max were like, let's go feed these guys and take care of them and figure out a way to get down there. And I was like, no, you need to coordinate with somebody. It's a federal disaster zone. And Josh was on the phone. He made every connection he could with kind of on the state level, talking to people that were with the Texas Rangers and was like, I can get in, I'll find a way. Like, we're going down there. So, that was just on his own volition. He just wanted to help people.
What's pretty amazing about that, beyond, the generosity is I don't think the average Joe, average Jane has any idea the tour schedule of a musician, much less a country band who it seems like country artists are like perpetually on tour. They tour year round. Yeah. And to be able to carve out time like that speaks volumes.
Yeah. So Texas country tours pretty much every weekend. Yeah. It's, when you're on a large national act, you go and you do 2 months straight through and you go all around the country. We road dog like every weekend. And we get a good amount off to spend time with family and stuff, probably at least anywhere from like 6 weeks or so, 6 weekends off, essentially. It influxes depending on the year or whatever. But that was a Saturday. They were on the road Friday and Saturday, and then Josh was driving down there, I think on Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, because it had hit by Sunday, and then they had to coordinate and go down early that week. So he slept in his car for 2 or 3 nights and then came back up. And he loves to sleep in his car. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, he loves a nice hotel, but he's like, I'll just sleep in my truck. And I was like, it's dangerous. And that's another thing about working in a zone like that. And we've learned, even from trying to give money to it, it's a federal disaster zone, and there's a lot of violence. It's people can loot depending on if it's not been contained properly. So it's a scary place to be. Yeah. But people absolutely need boots on the ground there. So, we were happy to be able to do that.
You had mentioned, touring, the band being a Texas band, the travel schedule is more significant. And one of the things you see with touring is you see a lot of merch sales. And I sort of some people collect different things, and people are aficionados of different things. Yeah. I like 2 things. I like cowboy boots and T-shirts. And so we're going to talk about cowboy boots and T-shirts, Sarah. the first thing I wanted to ask you about was like just the merch side of things, because I know you did a T-shirt fundraiser for Harvey, or was it for Dallas, or both?
I've done both. Yeah.
Okay. So like, I love T-shirts, and, typically bands sell merch to sell merch, and that's a profit center, a revenue stream, for a lot of brands. But you guys actually do it for philanthropic purposes too. Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the genesis of that, and what that has done from an awareness standpoint? Because it's literally people buy a shirt and they're a walking billboard for a cause that they're passionate about.
I mean, you pretty much cover all the bases on that. So there's a lot of really great organizations that we haven't exactly stylized identical to what they do, but we have seen other organizations that do really well, and they bring branding and awareness and income through that. And so I knew, based off of just my time working in merch, and I love merch. I love designing it. I love slinging it. I would still go on the road and sell it.
Yeah.
Like if our merch guy had a weekend off, they could call on me to go do it this weekend. I don't know why. I just love it. And that's another great way to engage with our fan base. Honestly, if you want to meet your fan base, like the merch table is prime. So, it's a great revenue stream, and it's a direct revenue stream, and it is easy marketing, and it is easy. It's a low overhead. Of course, we use it again to brand something for Jab Cares. And so it's fun to also work with other brands and I've worked with like Tumbleweed Textiles. We built that Dallas Love shirt, and then we get some cross promotion for them as well. So, I think cross promoting with merch is a great thing for you to do as well. And there have been a lot of companies we've gotten where we've done like mini collaborations with them.
Awesome.
And we do, that allows them some of our audience share, and we get, some of their audience share.
And it's great for the entrepreneur who maybe has a smaller audience. You can cross promote and literally kind of borrow someone else's audience temporarily to grow your own, and vice versa. And I think a lot of people are kind of leaving that opportunity. I don't mean leaving it on the table from a revenue standpoint, just from a visibility and a promotional standpoint. They're not leveraging that enough. So that's a great lesson for people. Thank you, Sarah. So let's talk about cowboy boots.
Yes.
You're doing a very cool promotion with a boot company and Jab Cares. I am partial to Anderson Bean cowboy boot. Those are my people. Yeah. Ryan Vaughn and the good folks there. But tell me about this cool promotion that you guys are doing and how that kind of came to be.
Yeah. So Black Star Boots, I do outside consulting with a couple of different companies. And so one of my best friends from college, he took on Black Star's branding, and they were just they were asking me questions about connecting with who would normally be our fan base for Jab Cares. And so we kind of kicked it around, and the Girl Down in Texas thing, management actually approached me and said that was their idea, where they said, we want to work with philanthropies and sororities. Yeah. And we want to create some sort of, engagement with them and use that relationship and, of course, push the single, but it's an easy, fun way to engage people and to get access to their socials and to get a little bit more presence with that. And so we had to have the right fit from a brand perspective. And Black Star, I was working with them. I'm one of their ambassadors. So we just got started in the ambassador program. So I got to try the boots on and look at the styles and stuff. And they really are like, I'm not just selling it because it's a podcast. I have worn boots my entire life. They're the most the most comfortable pair I've ever had. So,
and a good pair of boots, just if you're listening and you don't own boots, you should. Yeah. A good pair of boots are more comfortable than, picture your most comfortable sneakers. Good pair of boots, way more comfortable.
Yeah, right? Well, my dad is a lifetime cowboy boot wearer. He's from South Texas, and, he rode, for those of you who don't live in Texas, you're going to think this sounds so stereotypical, but my dad rode bulls recreationally for about 2.5 years, and he worked ranches and was a hunter, and so he wore boots. That was his off-duty shoe. Yeah. And when I kind of got turned out on them in high school because I thought country wasn't cool. And then in college, he bought me a pair. And I told him I was just surprised how comfortable they are. And he's like, Sarah, this is what ranchers wear every day. Yep. Like they wouldn't be walking around on hard ground if this was bad for their shoes and their back. He's like, they have to be comfortable. They're not just stylish, they're functional. So boots are actually very functional for those of you who they're not just a fashion statement. And good boots should be comfortable. You shouldn't have to wear them 40 times before you break them in. So, yeah.
So Black Star Boots and Jab Cares, what exactly are you doing together? Mm-hmm. Because before you answer, I ask this because I love examples. Mm-hmm. Because personally, I believe your best ideas, whatever business or industry you're in, your best ideas are going to come from outside your industry. Mm-hmm. I look at what musicians do, particularly country artists who have the most direct fan to artist connection. I look at what they do as you're really the ultimate entrepreneurs, and your ability to kind of cross promote and expand your brand through your fans is tremendous. So I ask for these examples because I think people are going to really kind of get inspiration from it.
Mm-hmm. One thing I've learned is that cross branding is really effective, and then bartering, which is a dirty word, I think, in our culture, but I have learned for myself as the director of Jab Cares, I have like a bunch of different assets that I have handy to me. Bartering and like being able to trade your businesses off to use each other for either business services or your socials. Like those are things that I think have kind of become, they just haven't been talked about in the mainstream, but I try to kind of barter my services as much as I can with other organizations, so that we can utilize their services as well. So, like I'm working with the Bowen Foundation this weekend, and I'm running their auction for them. And so in turn, they're going to make a small donation back to Jab Cares instead of paying someone to run that auction. So they can offload it to somebody who knows what they're doing. They know I'm going to handle it with care, and that I'll take care of, Wade's family. And instead of just paying a random person or, figuring out a stranger to come run it, or paying the auction company, even more money, we'll just give money back to Jab Care. So,
everybody wins.
Yeah.
Everyone wins in that deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're just hiring someone out, the ultimate winner is whoever you hired.
Yeah.
But you can barter and create a synergy. Everybody wins. That's great.
Yeah. And that's where my brain works really well, is trying to, and that's why keeping a really good solid network is important, because you can always call on people to use their services. And I think another thing is to not be afraid to do stuff for free from time to time, not because I think you want to manipulate people or use that, but I think every now and then I'll help people with an event or with their marketing or with their branding or something, just because, it's good for our brand as Jab Cares for me to be, assisting other people and to show that we have concern for other organizations outside of ours. But it creates a really good partnership with people who know that, that they can depend on you, and that, you can utilize them as well. So, and that's something I've kind of, that's a niche I found for myself in this organization.
So 2 things real quick. Are you going to be doing the auction next year for the Bowen Foundation?
I might. I'm not sure. We have ours as well.
Either way, for both of you, I'd like to contribute something, in terms of an auction item. So let's talk offline afterwards about that.
Yeah.
And I want to hear more about this Black Star cross promotion, how you executed that. So Black Star,
essentially, they were the underwriter for the event. And so the big trade was that they wanted to have access to that audience. They sell women's boots, and so they're like, you're our fan bases, or our customer base is who we want, your fan base. And so it's promoted as the Black Star Girls Down in Texas promotion. And so
they got the naming rights.
Cool. Yeah. And so on the back end, we've already kind of decided the winner on that. On the back end, we're figuring out ways to create like face-to-face interaction with the boots, engagement. Because boots are actually a little hard to sell online. especially on a new product or a new brand. It's hard to make that conversion because you're like, they look stylish, they feel comfortable, but there are things that you have to see and touch and try in person. So now the next step is like, okay, well, how do we get these girls physically in front of these booths and figure that out? So the winner of our contest, we did private concerts in their sorority houses, and then they got a donation back to their philanthropy through their sorority. And then we were allowed to, they pushed and promoted the contest was that the girls had to push and promote and make their own video using Jab Cares and using Girl Down in Texas. And so that gave access to everyone to these college socials, which are huge.
So you're almost even crowdsourcing social media for the promotion too.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, to me, that's the genius of that.
Well, yeah. And I always tell people, because I dabble a little bit in online marketing, and people are always like, you gotta buy, let's promote this, let's push it. And I'm like, it's great, but impression is one impression. So that means that one person looked at that ad. If you can get people to share, average person has, I don't know what, I'm going to assume like at least 500 friends on Facebook. You get someone to share something or like something or tag in, that's that number times 500. So, us putting a video out where it's 200 girls in a sorority and they're pushing and promoting through their socials, those girls have thousands of friends. Like the number.
So 200 times 1,000, folks. You do the math, right?
Yeah. So, well, it's just crazy how many built-in followers people have around that age now. Like my age bracket, we're like, oh, if we're up to 1,000, we're doing really good. And a lot of college girls are at like 6,000. So
and my age bracket, it's kind of like too old for Snapchat, too young for Life Alert.
Yeah. So, I think I'm too. I did Snapchat for a while, and I was like, it's just another thing to keep up with. It's a lot.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's just so much, and it's so fragmented. So you're smart to be able to kind of, deploy large numbers and crowdsource that. Folks, if you weren't paying close, you should have gotten 3 ideas in the last 5 minutes. If you weren't paying close enough attention, write this down now. Number 1, cross promotions. Number 2, barter. And number 3, create a contest. People love contests. People love the opportunity to win, share, whether it's swag or access, to an organization or event. People love contests. Gamification is at the core of social media today. And, you all ought to be harnessing those 3 things for your brand. And you can thank Sarah for those ideas right now. So, Sarah, tell me a little bit about just sort of how, I think it's important, for people to understand, like, with Jab Cares, this is all being done organically. And I think oftentimes, when people think of charities, or think of the quote, air quotes, 501c3, they think of these big kind of corporate entities. And this is really the furthest thing from it. And you're not funneling money to, some large corporate charities. Talk about just sort of the organic, altruistic nature of exactly what you guys are doing.
So I think our biggest thing is, and we talked about this offline, but our biggest thing is when I started doing the research and building, whether we were going to be public charity, private foundation, we looked at what percentage goes back, or the minimum percentage that goes back to the recipients and the causes. And for a private foundation, you only have to contribute 5% of your take-in, which is absurd. Like that means you can just keep and spend 95%. Like 95% of your nonprofit you can profit off of.
I think that's why people, there's kind of inherent distrust by consumers with anything. But when you think of charities, when 95% can be capped, that really doesn't engender a whole lot of trust.
Yeah. And a public charity, a larger one, that you guys are probably more familiar with, and, I won't slice anyone by throwing their name out there. Sure. Public charities have a little bit of a higher percentage, but it's still nowhere near, like, you would think that it's 50% minimum that needs to go back to the cause, and it's nowhere near that. It's double digits, but it's the low double digits. And that was something someone I know who's really big into finances approached me, and he was like, oh, no, you only have to give back this 12.5 or 15%. I can't remember. And I haven't, so if anyone's going to fact check that, I haven't fact checked that in a while, but he was like, it's a really small range. So you see a lot of these organizations and endowments that are affiliated with families or with businesses, and you're like, oh, they give away all this money. And some of them do. Some of them genuinely give that money back to specific causes. They build research institutions, and they do give a huge percentage of that money. But other places, they keep a lot of it, or they use it for large overhead. They use it for marketing. They use it for promotion. And they kind of throw a small percentage back. So we in no way want to be making money off of our nonprofit. That's not at all the priority. It's not what we do. So, I mean, there's a full band setup that runs very well, and they are, you know, thriving and making a living, and everybody can eat at night, and there's electricity and cars in the driveway and all kinds of stuff. So, there's no drive to be making profit off of our nonprofit. And so we would love to be in the smallest potential margin of overhead expenses and be giving away, you know, instead of taking 5%, giving away 5%, we'd love to be subsiding off of 5% in overhead. We have to build a good donor base outside of just the band and outside of just, you know, ticket sales or merch. And so that's where our next steps are, is figuring out different streams of revenue for us, just outside of directly coming in from the band. But we would love to be operating at the smallest amount of expenses possible, so we can just keep giving money. And we would like to be giving money directly to people instead of causes, because we've given to certain large organizations and we have no idea where that money ends up. You know?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way you've done what you've done. It sort of has it seems to me, a two-pronged approach. Number one is you're able to help people who have immediate pressing needs and need the help. Mm-hmm. And number two, you had mentioned it a little earlier in the interview, is that there are some causes that aren't able to create their own 501c3 because A, that costs money. B, it's time consuming and complicated. C, I'm doing the guns up sign for Texas Tech with my hand right now. I just realized. Nice. So there you go. But C is, it's, you know, I think it's costly, time consuming, and some people just don't have the resources. So you're actually able to raise money. They can raise money through Jab Cares, and you funnel 100% of that back. You know, how often has that happened?
We did 3 to 4 pretty big ones last year. And you're actually able to, like, from a nonprofit, and I check this with my compliance person. So if someone out there is saying this is unethical, you can hold a percentage back if you are allowing your 501c3 as a silo. Now, I don't feel comfortable doing that unless I'm actually planning an event with them and helping them, like, with the fundraising and bringing donor money in and kind of forecasting the event, just because I'm not comfortable with it. Now there's a lot of work involved with it. And so I would not say that's a business model. Like, you couldn't build a nonprofit off of that, because the issuing on tax receipts is a nightmare. So if you're working with an event that's going to be bringing in $100,000, you're going to be issuing $100,000 on tax receipts, and that is a lot of work. So
what's nice about that, Sarah, though, is, like, so let's say someone doesn't have a nonprofit and they want to create a GoFundMe or some other sort of crowdfunding initiative for like for their charitable cause or need. That like in the case of GoFundMe, that online kind of pass through, they're going to take a pound of flesh, so to speak. They're going to take, what, 10, 15%, some cases more. And, you know, for a smaller kind of charitable, you know, charity drive, that's a big chunk for people. So you're enabling them to not lose out on potential money. Yeah.
Well, and then it's still a percentage of that event is still going towards a nonprofit, you know, because the money goes to us. We're a 501c3. So it's still going to a good cause. It's just, you're changing, you know, it's 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. You're just changing where that money is going to, you know? And I had this conversation with someone I know, with event planning, because I've done event planning off and on for 10 years. And so I was talking to them about helping with nonprofit event planning. And I'm like, you're going to have to pay, if you bring in an outside resource, you're going to have to pay 15, 20% of your take home to an individual or to a company. And so I'm like, I would rather give that money to another charity. Sure. And I think that's a sustainable business model, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And for all the right reasons too. So I think intent is such a big part of all of this, just kind of measuring people's intent and goodwill. What has creating this nonprofit and, painting your fans into the picture, letting them help paint the picture in terms of what they want to support, and what has that done just kind of from a social equity standpoint for you and the band as an organization? I think it really differentiates you from many others who do what you guys do. Yeah,
I think it's kind of it's twofold. So I would answer that in layers. I think on one hand, it is great that people equate us with wanting to be kind of humanitarians and helping people. But there's the other side where we feel like we can't help everyone. And
Sure.
and I hate that limitation of feeling like, there's a family that'll reach out and they have a funeral service they can't afford, or a family that reaches out and needs, money for cancer treatment. And so there's such a vast need just within our fan base, when we have in the scope of the world, we have a great set of fans and a good number. But like when you think in terms of, the social impact it has on it, we just feel like it's just a drop in the bucket sometimes,
Sure.
where it's like, especially around the holidays where all these causes come up and you just want to give money to everybody. So we have to prioritize that in a way. And sometimes it's just the time that someone reaches out to us and we're like, yeah, perfect. We've got the finances, we've got, nothing on the horizon that's about to chip away a huge chunk of time or money. And so, or, we're not allocating this to a certain amount or a certain cause. And so we can give you blank amount of money and that'll cover your need, versus like sometimes there's a GoFundMe and I'm like, I can only throw in $200 for this, So, you kind of have to allow yourself to take little wins where you can and not get so overwhelmed with feeling like you're not changing the entire world Sure. every day.
Yeah, I think the technical term for that I learned is it's called the empathy telescope, which is kind of an interesting thing. And so if you ever watch the Sarah McLachlan ASPCA commercials,
yikes!
In the arms of those commercials.
You went dark on that.
But here's my point, and this should be reassuring for you and everyone listening: is they're very intentional about how they the visuals, the optics of it. They always show you one dog.
Yeah,
it's got like 3 legs and it looks sad and it's in a cage,
shaking.
And then they'll split the camera over to another kennel that has the little shaking, trembling little dog, but it's never like a full kennel of all these hundreds of dogs. It's one at a time, because we feel like if we see, so there's an entire, country of starving children in Africa, and this is another commercial, I think it's Feed the World or whatever it is. They always show you one child at a time, because we don't feel like we can make a difference. I can't, out of pocket feed an entire village, but I can, for the cost of a cup of coffee, feed a child 3 meals a day.
Sure.
Or I can help one animal by rescuing one pet. And so as you're looking at Jab Cares and people who are listening and helping serve their community, if you feel like you don't make a difference because it's, there's 7.6 billion people on planet Earth, you just kind of remember that empathy telescope, because we all really do make a difference in our little corner of the world. So I think that's the beauty of what you're doing is it's giving a time, energy, and also resources. What would you recommend? I love to ask the question. I think this is the $1 million question for anybody. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you got started with Jab Cares? And I ask that because I think people are looking for next steps or how they can get started. What would you recommend people avoid? Like, what do you know now that you wish you'd have known back then? I know back then's only 2 years ago, but there's a learning.
Yeah. No, in terms of a startup of a new business, 2 years feels like a decade.
Yeah. It's like dog years. It's like 14.
Oh, have mercy. Yeah. And especially with something like this, that's kind of an uncharted water. And grew from no framework of like our previous business model. But I actually had this conversation with someone I knew who's running a completely different business model. But I told her, your first year is probably going to be your hardest year of business in anything you do. There's some people that they strike it and that first year goes and it's seamless. But I think if you brace yourself and expect on the front end, like, this is going to be the hardest I've ever worked doing something, and expect to put in the work, expect criticism, expect pushback. And if your vision you feel like is more important than any of that negative pushback you're feeling or resistance, then you have to do it. You just have to go for it. Another thing I think people...
And that's why it'll work, if your vision is bigger than the negativity.
Yeah, and I think another thing I've learned working outside of a corporate model, and this is not necessarily a misconception I had, but it's something I would put a precedent on other people, like, working for yourself or working for a nonprofit is not going to be less work. So if you're working for the man right now and you think, I just want to run my own company so I can go play golf and so I can keep my own hours and so I can work 20 hours a week, like, then don't work for yourself unless you're 7-8 years vetted in what you do, or you're following someone else's business model. Like, you're going to be putting in more hours than anyone puts in. You're going to be working harder than other people are working because you're doing something other people aren't doing, and you're trying to create something that's not already there. So when you're creating something from thin air, you have to really just pull yourself up from your bootstraps on it. And you have to push through. Like, it can't be, you can't have like 10 days in a row feeling sorry for yourself or letting yourself get kicked down. It's like, you have to it's no, move on, pivot, go to a yes, keep going till you find yeses. And that's anything we've done in terms of working with our tournament or building silos of different types of income. It's like, you have to, it's like a jackrabbit, you hit a no and you turn, it'll like bounce around like this. So you have to stay flexible. And I think the most important thing my dad always told me was, it's important to have goals, and stick with your goals, but be flexible on your plans. So I think a lot of times we organize in our mind, like, I want blank to happen and I want it to happen this way. And I don't think the means are as important as the ends a lot of times. So set your goals and be flexible by the means with which you get to them, and allow yourself a little bit of time, away from that goal, instead of, if you don't hit your cash mark in 3 years, it's okay. You'll hit your cash mark eventually.
Sure. I think you touched on something very important, and it's that, the first year is always the toughest year in anything. Mm-hmm. And if you hit one out of the park in your first year, you're probably a unicorn. That's not normal. It doesn't happen. Yeah. And you actually ought to be very nervous about that, because you caught lightning in a bottle early. Mm-hmm. And you should not expect that to happen in year 2, year 3, year 4. Mm-hmm. So be very careful about that. I love your comment of no, move on, pivot, get to yes. And I think that's great advice for everyone. Mm-hmm. If you had to, someone is listening to this and they want to either deepen their commitment to, whether it's a nonprofit or a foundation they've started, or perhaps they want to start their own. Mm-hmm. What do you think is a good first step for somebody who's listening?
I think nonprofit is the same thing as an effective business model, where you think, what is something I care about that's either not being done or could be done better? And I think that's where a lot of people inventors come up with these great inventions that are, I forgot. The movie Joy was based off of it's a real story of a woman who was a housewife who was like, this mop is terrible. So she made a mop that works, and that, a woman who actually mopped would use. And so that's what makes a good inventor, what makes a good business model, and what makes a good nonprofit is, here's an area that's unserviced that is important to me, and it tugs on my heartstrings, so it's going to tug on someone else's heartstrings.
Sure.
And it's the same way where Josh writes a song that is autobiographical and it's reflective of how he feels.
Mm-hmm.
People hear it and they have that empathy, and it resonates with them directly. And nonprofit is the exact same way. It matters to you. It's going to matter to somebody else, you know?
Absolutely. I think that, we like tends to be attracted to like,
Mm-hmm.
we like people who sort of remind us of ourselves in many ways,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's, mutual interest or appearance or whatever it is. So you ought to be doing it for yourself. There should be an autobiographical quality to whatever you're doing, because that's kind of what sustains you through the adversity is you
Mm-hmm.
care about it and something you're passionate about. I've gotten involved in charitable endeavors that I wasn't passionate about, and it became a slog. It
Mm-hmm.
became work. It didn't fuel me or energize me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's great advice, Sarah. What's the worst piece of advice you ever got? And, how did you excel by kind of like going in the opposite direction of horrible advice you got?
Oh gosh, that's hard to, did you want it to just be in terms of the music or a nonprofit, or just in general?
Really in anything, because I think we can, there's so much we can learn from people. I'm just fascinated by you. And I asked that question because like everyone always asks, what's your favorite quote? What's the best piece of advice you ever got?
Right.
Like, I'm a big believer in whatever's, everybody else is doing, do the exact opposite. And I think we learn more from our failures, and we learn more from bad teachers or bad coaches or bad bosses than we really ever learn from the good ones. So what's the worst piece of advice you've gotten on anything, and how have you kind of taken that opposite approach with it?
I think I've learned I'm a person that, and I used to not feel this way, but the older I get, the more someone tells me I can't do blank because of blank. Or because this is the industry and the industry is blank, and this is our fan base and our fan base is this. Like, I have learned that breaking those barriers and opening those boxes is really where the most effective pieces come through.
Yep.
I think people would tell Josh, like, people don't want to hear you talk about human trafficking. They want to hear songs about beer and women and trucks and blah, blah, blah. And Josh would tell you, I don't think that's true at all. I think people want to hear things that are socially conscious, that is happening around their world and impacts them, and that is going to make them aware of the world that they're living in. So from working in different industries, I have learned oftentimes those are limitations that other people accepted from other people around them. And I've just kind of, outside of breaking rules and laws, like, I've just learned to ignore them and to rebuff them and to challenge them, and to, if people don't want to work, they don't want to work with me because I'm not working within their own parameters, then I just pick up my toys and I go elsewhere. Because I know a lot of people that don't do things because people have told them it won't work. And I just think that that's a really antiquated way of thinking,
Absolutely. And the music industry is a great example of that. There's like a very definitive box in terms of what, kind of mainstream or traditional record label thinks is commercial appeal.
Yes.
And if you don't fit in it, you're not going to be a part of their world very long or any longer. And I just think that's short-sighted, because if you don't, like what I have always said back as a coach and now as an executive coach, like, if you don't have a higher purpose than winning, you're never going to really win, like truly win. So you really kind of spoke to that higher purpose, and, being willing to blaze your own trail, which I think is so important. Sarah, I could talk to you all day. So what I'd love to do is I'd love to schedule a part 2 at some point. But in the meanwhile, what would be the best place for people to connect with Jab Cares and reach out to you directly?
Probably our Facebook page, and it's just capital J, capital A, capital B, Cares. And we sometimes our Josh Abbott Band Facebook page will share in between. But that's where our fans engage the most. We have our biggest followership, and it's just more format friendly than some. We're on Instagram and all the other things, but I tend to think the content sharing and our interaction is best on Facebook. So that's where it's sent people.
Thank you. And you should all absolutely go to Jab Care's Facebook page, buy yourself a really nice t-shirt. And if you're a lady, you could, or if you're shopping for a lady, you could get yourself a pair of Black Star boots. Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are I'm not overselling how comfortable these are.
I believe you.
Yeah. It's like I think it's Bic crystal pin where it says right first time every time. And that's like a Black Star boot. Like you can walk in it for days the first time you wear it. So, and cool. women know that's important.
Oh, yeah.
That is a unicorn of a shoe right there.
Absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much. I can't wait to, follow up the conversation and schedule part 2 with you. And again, I really appreciate your time. I know this was a while in the works, and it's really been great chatting with you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, I look forward to talking to you again soon. So
thank you.
Yep.